The bosses in the Souls games are some of the best we've seen in all of gaming, especially in the DLCs. But not all of these bosses are on par with the best. That's why today I wanted to talk about the worst boss in every Soulsborne DLC, not including Elden Ring, because they're still making us cry while we wait. Starting with Dark Souls 1, we have the Sanctuary Guardian. I mean, come on, did you really expect me to put Artorias, Manus, or Calamite here? But the Sanctuary Guardian really isn't bad at all. It's definitely a great opener for the DLC and a good way to learn that you will no longer have a single moment to use an Estus Flask during any boss fight for the rest of the game. I wish I was joking. I actually think this boss is really cool and I like the design a lot. It's just one of the more forgettable ones for me. It has some unique attacks that make the fight interesting, but not too many where it gets overwhelming. I will say I'm not a huge fan of the fact that you can get poisoned during this fight because it doesn't feel super fitting here, and poison's a pain in the ass. On top of that, some of its ranged attacks make me want to start a New Year's resolution to work out every day, quit after a week because New Year's resolutions don't really work, come back to it a few months later because I got really depressed when I saw myself in a picture at the beach, surprisingly stick to it and eat really healthy, start taking a bunch of sketchy supplements the guy from the gas station alley recommended me, probably should go to the doctor, but I avoid going to the doctor, and eventually get as buff as Andre so I can break my controller to little pieces after dying to this boss again. In all seriousness, the Dark Souls DLC doesn't really have any bad bosses in my opinion, but out of the 4 bosses we got, this one is really a no-brainer for me. And speaking of no-brainers, today's video is sponsored by Factor 75. If you hate wasting time cooking as much as I do, you're gonna want to check this out. When I'm done with my work for the day, the last thing I want to do is go to the grocery store, wait in line, drive home, cook my food, eat it in 5 seconds, then do the dishes. That's why Factor 75 has been awesome for me. Factor meals arrive pre-prepared and ready to eat in 2 minutes or less, even faster than ordering in. Meal plans offer variety with a rotating weekly menu of over 27 meal options and over 33 add-ons like smoothies, keto shakes, desserts, and more. I tried some of the smoothies and they're amazing. It also helps you avoid fast food and ordering in with no-nonsense, delicious food that's ready quickly. Factor's chef-prepared meals take the guesswork out of eating well, so you never have to opt for something that isn't good for you. It's also super flexible for any lifestyle. With meal preference options like keto, calorie smart, vegan, vegetarian, and their 27 plus meal options each week, there's something for everyone. Meal plans range from 4 to 18 meals per week, and you can add more or reduce the number depending on your specific needs. You can easily modify food preferences and skip a week if needed. Use my link or go to go.factor75.com and use the code POGEMBERJAN60 for 60% off your first box. Moving on to Dark Souls 2, oh man, this was a tough choice. I could have said the blue smelter demon due to its ridiculous delays to throw you off from the red smelter demon, or the fact that it's a reskin boss that you paid for, or the fact that the boss run is so bad you might actually have to face your real life problems instead of going through the run again, but I can't. The blue smelter demon itself really wasn't a terrible boss for me, and I actually enjoyed relearning the fight a bit. But then I came across the Gank Squad, terribly designed boss, even worse boss run. But for some reason, I kind of enjoyed this one too. Sure, it's a horrible idea for a boss fight, but I like NPC fights normally, and this one caught me off guard, so it was kind of a fun challenge to face in my first playthrough. It's like one of those movies that's so bad it's good, like Final Destination or the Ember Channel. My decision for the worst boss in the Dark Souls 2 DLC has to be Ludin Zalin, the King's Pets. While you might think the King's Pets would at least make for a decent boss fight, you would be incorrect, young innocent subscriber of the Ember Channel, absolutely incorrect. Not only is this the worst boss run in boss run history, the boss is just a reskin and a gank and a terrible fight as well. And not to mention, it's a reskin of a boss that's already in the DLC. For the record, I love Dark Souls 2, but sweet mama bear, nothing about this fight is fun. The pets aren't really too difficult either, but you'll be so nervous about having to conquer the frigid outskirts again that you'll play like you've never seen a controller before. It gets bonus points for the second one not coming in until the first one gets below half health, but man, this is not a good fight. They don't balance well with each other at all, and it's clear they were just filler content for the DLC. Man, just think how much we would all claim the frigid outskirts to be a necessary part of the Souls experience if there was actually a good boss at the end. Anyway, moving on to Bloodborne, probably the most obvious one on this list, we have the Living Failures. It's nice that they put me and my friends in the game, but the fight really isn't all that great. The Living Failures start off similar to the witches with some of the most passive enemies you'll ever see in Bloodborne. And that's pretty much it. No, seriously, this fight is just weird, and while it has an interesting concept, it's just too easy to be very memorable. I think the meteor attack is really cool, and it's a shame that the galaxy nighttime theme doesn't stay and become a full second phase. The Living Failures basically just sit there and try to smack you around while their friends send AoEs and other magic at you. This fight can definitely get overwhelming, but due to their lack of aggression, it's pretty easy to single one of them out and take them down before moving on to the others. I think the arena you fight them in is really cool as well, but compared to the quality quality of the other DLC bosses in this game, this fight is pretty forgettable. And finally, we have Dark Souls 3, home of my favorite bosses in the series. While I'm tempted to say Half-Light, I think it's just too hard to rank because it depends on the player you're fighting if you're playing online. If you get a good fight in, it's actually pretty fun, and I like the idea of players getting summoned in as the boss. That being said, there's only one other fight that could possibly take this spot, and that is the Champion's Gravetender and Gravetender Great Wolf. I don't know who named this kid Champion, but I would not trust them to choose a restaurant for me. This fight just lacks a lot of creativity, and the NPC is easier than the noobs who got Elden Ring for Christmas last week. No hate on noobs here, you just haven't learned to get good yet, sorry. This fight would have been a lot more enjoyable if you didn't have to fight a bunch of wolves while the NPC spams weapon arts at you. I thought we learned from the Capra demon, didn't we? Even better, before the Gravetender is gone, the Great Wolf decides to show up and sprint all over the place and make the camera do what it does best. The Great Wolf is basically just Vort if he took some of the stuff the guy from the gas station alley was selling. He's not the hardest boss in the world, he's more just kind of annoying, especially if you haven't killed the so-called champion yet. Overall, I think this boss was just a bit of a disappointment compared to the ones surrounding it, but definitely wasn't anything too terrible. And I know a lot of people are still mad that I don't do outros, so this time I'll